Well, let's talk about establishing a color scheme. Try to get inspired by your main concept idea. Here we can see 3 examples. With mermaids, I use the sea and really soft and delicate colors like blue and pink as inspiration. For the harpies, I thought about a desert and pretty passionate and kind of an aggressive palette. So I went with warm colors with a tiny touch of blue. And for the fonts, I was inspired by the woods and colors that envision the forest like the color green. So once you know where to take your inspiration from, we can create a really simple color palette. For this particular series of patterns, I will try to keep a limited palette. Just about 5 colors, maybe a couple of variations on shades for some tiny details, but that's it. I try to keep my color palette limited, always thinking about how they will look together on fabric. You should always think about the surface you're going to print your patterns on. I always try to be really careful with my color choices. Sometimes you can really hurt a piece by adding way too many colors or combinations that don't really translate well once they're printed, so always have that in mind. Okay, now that we have our color palette, we're going to paint all your shapes in a dark but opaque color so you can mask them. That will make your entire process more simple. We're gonna go to our tool menu, choose our lasso tool, and you're going to follow the shape of all your drawings. Don't worry if it's not perfect. We can erase that later. Okay, once I finish roughly selecting my drawings, I just choose the paint bucket tool and fill in on a different layer, of course, with an opaque but dark color. I always try to choose a color that is not darker than my line work. Now, I'll just select the layer we just painted and lower the opacity. Then I will select my eraser tool and I'm just calmly going to focus on cleaning all the edges. Trying to be really careful and respecting all the detail my drawings have. if something is missing, you just simply choose your brush tool and repaint all those areas. You can also use the eraser tool and trace the silhouette of your drawings. And then just pick the selection tool and press the delete key. That will save you a lot of time. Now I will just establish my background color. Once you finish, you just need to use Ctrl-click over the layer and it will select the entire area automatically. And after that, you can start painting with your brush tool without much trouble. And you'll have a dark base underneath that will make your coloring more interesting to build on. You can see that I really like to leave some traces of that dark color I applied before as a base, because it makes my coloring look more traditional and rich. You can notice that I'm keeping my coloring really simple. As I said before, for the format I'm going to print on, I won't need that much detail. So this texture I'm creating is just good enough for me. Now this is the fun part of the process. At least it's the one that I enjoy the most. I'm gonna start painting my characters using the palette I talked about earlier on this video. Again, I'm just leaving some areas with the original background color to create a more painterly texture. And just quickly trying to imagine if the palette actually works or if I should softly make some changes. Everything is a little bit speed up so you don't die of boredom, but I will say that you should definitely take your time for this part. I want to use her hair color as inspiration for painting her tail. I feel like it looks more harmonious in that way. So, as I said before, I just tried to generate really simple but important details. For example, for this specific pattern, I feel like taking a little bit of extra time painting some scales on the mermaid's tails will make a huge difference. So for this, I just selected my lasso tool and freely draw all the scales. They're just like teardrops kind of shapes. And then I select my bucket tool and paint on a darker shade. Darker than the tail, just a little darker. Here I'm just erasing some of the brush strokes that are quite off. And then I'm just going to repeat the scale process with a darker shade than before and paint some more scales. I also decided to create some highlights, and using those same colors I'm gonna paint some simple shadows that after printing all my series I noticed weren't necessary. Now I'm just quickly gonna show you how I painted the rest. And that's it, guys. As you can see, I try not to get too lost into detail. I just painted some minimal shading and also some blush on cheeks and shoulders. That's a personal preference. Now I would like to show you what I did with color on my harpy pattern. This pattern is completely different. It has more of an aggressive color palette. I kept changing colors all the way. As you can see, I started with a white background. But at the end, when I decided to print it on fabric, I decided to change it to a deep red. And that's normal. That's why you should always do print tests before doing anything big. As I keep telling you, sometimes patterns or any kind of digital art won't translate correctly on paper or fabric. So it's okay to change your mind. As you can see, for this one I kept changing colors. Some things didn't quite look right. It's okay if you take your time. Here I'm just trying to add more values to some of the lines and trying to bring some details to their feathers and hair. Okay, now that we have finished our coloring and that you guys have seen two different examples of approaching digital painting for patterns, all we have to do is to get rid of our safe red area. For that, I'm gonna choose my crop tool and drag from the sides till I completely cut it, and just save my image on a PNG format on CMYK.